Hello book lovers, and welcome back or welcome to Nakat's Bookish Cafe. Today we are here to go through my top books of 2024. Alright guys, it is time to talk about some of the best books that I read in 2024. It is always a fun time to go back and take a look at what I read and which books really stuck with me. I wish that I could say that this was an amazing reading year. It was good, but I feel like I didn't have too many standouts. On top of that, I am just a girl with a bad memory. It really does not matter how much I enjoy a book. Chances are after a few months, my memory on the details and everything is gonna start to get a little bit hazy. So I am going to do my best to talk about these books and why I love them. But keep in mind that I am someone who really just rates mostly based off vibes. Obviously, there are other things that contribute to my enjoyment of a book, but really I just rate books based off of, like, once I finish the book, I'm like, yes, this was a 5-star read. I really don't put too much thought into it. But that being said, I have 6 books that I can confidently say are my favorite books of the year. I do have 2 honorable mentions that I was kind of like, should I add them to this list? Should I not? So I'm gonna put them as honorable mentions because I really enjoyed them and definitely want to give them their moment in the spotlight because I definitely think that they are worth reading. So without further ado, let's go into those 2 honorable mentions and then we will talk about my favorites from order of least favorite, but still obviously an all-time fave, to my top book of the year. All right, so the first honorable mention I want to talk about is the only one of these books that I actually own. I do need to get my hand on a few more of these books, but that being said, it is going to be the Criminal Intention series by Cole McCade. I'm here holding up episode 6. This is I think it ended up being 13 book series, and I read the majority of it this year. I am kind of using this as a placeholder for the entire series because while I didn't rate too many in the series 5 stars, this one I did rate 5 stars, which is why I'm using it as an example. I also happen not to own any of the books before book 6 because I was reading them on KU before that point. But this is a book where we are following 2 characters that I absolutely adore, and that is Malcolm and Sanjay, and they are homicide detectives for the Baltimore Police Department. And the aspect of the story that I enjoy the most is the characters, not just our main 2 characters, but also all the side characters that they interact with throughout this story. While I do enjoy the mysteries of some of the individual books, there were a few mysteries that didn't quite fully capture my attention. So I would definitely say the mystery aspect of this series is the weaker part of the story. It is very much a mystery of the week series, but there is also an overarching plot. This is the first season. There is a second season, and I will hopefully be getting to that sometime here in 2025. One of the reasons I couldn't quite put the series as an all-time favorite is just because the way that the first season wrapped up left me a little bit disappointed. While I did rate the last 2 books like 5 and 4.5 stars, or was it 5 and 4 stars? I'm not even sure. They were highly rated and I had a great time with them. I felt that I was a little confused as to why we were finishing up a series or finishing up a season, because I felt like there was literally no aspect of this series that was wrapped up. And usually when you start to move into another season, you at least expect some aspect of the story to be wrapped up, and then you can start focusing on other things. But that is not the case. So I was a little thrown off and a little disappointed by that. But overall, I absolutely love Cole McCade's writing. I will probably read everything that he writes. I love these characters. I love the side characters. And I love how he writes smut. It works really well for me. So I did want to go ahead and put this as an honorable mention, even though I was left a little bit confused at the end of the series as to why he decided to end things that way, or rather to not end anything at all. But all the same, I will definitely be continuing with this series, and I'm kind of glad there's a second series because I am not done with these characters. The next book is going to be the second book in a trilogy. I have not yet finished this trilogy out yet. I am actually on hold at the library for the third book, and as every day goes by and that hold doesn't come in, I'm becoming less and less optimistic that I'm actually going to be able to get to it this month. But that being said, this is The Children of Fallen Gods. This is the second book in the Lost Hearts trilogy. I can't remember exactly what it is called, but essentially this is a fantasy romance. I myself have found that I am not a big fan of romantasy because while I love romance, when it comes to fantasy, there's always something more interesting than the romance going on in the background, and it frustrates me when we spend too much time on the romance instead of all the magic and politics and wars that are going on. But this book, I think, did such a good job of balancing the romance and all of the different plot points that were going on. There was a lot happening in this book. Some people would say it's too much, but for me, I really enjoyed the pacing. I felt like it really made it easy for me to move through this story, despite the fact that I think it is a book that is over 600 pages long. I really enjoyed all of the characters. I felt like the relationship between our two main characters, Tasana and Max, really worked for me in this series. I felt like it was my least favorite part of the first book, but it worked a lot better for me now that their relationship has been a little bit more established. I felt like they did a really good job kind of supporting each other as they were going through the ringer. These characters definitely went through a lot, and it was really great to just see them constantly there supporting each other and getting comfort from each other. I really also enjoyed a new character's point of view that we were introduced to in the story, and I'm really interested to see where we go with that now that we are in the present day, because that point of view was initially kind of like a flashback point of view, but now we will be following that character in present day alongside our other characters, which I'm like, okay, I'm really intrigued to see where we go with this in the third book. Overall, I really enjoyed all the politics, all the war, which sounds like a terrible thing to say, but overall, I just had a really great time with the story. I think the author really did a great job with developing her characters, developing her plot. I really enjoy the writing, so I am having a grand old time with this story, and I definitely think that if you are someone who is into romantasy but is trying to get more into like the hardcore fantasy, this is probably a good place to go. I am definitely not a hardcore fantasy girly. I keep kind of creeping my way towards those books, but I'm still definitely very intimidated by them. But I felt very comfortable reading these first two books in the series. And then we have my third and final honorable mention, and that is going to be Hamartia. I hope I am saying that correctly. This was a male contemporary romance. This is between an American rock star who is currently presenting as a straight man. In fact, he is engaged to a woman, and our other character is a member of a K-pop group, and I absolutely love these characters. Our American rock star is Raphael, and our K-pop star is Jae-young, and especially Jae-young, I absolutely adored him. He really was going right for my heart. There was something about this character where he was definitely struggling with insecurity. He is a K-pop star. He is constantly striving for perfection as an individual, as well as a member of a group, where he is like, if I fail it is not just me that goes down. He puts so much pressure on himself, and just kind of watching him gain some confidence and kind of realize how much the people around him care about him as like an individual and not just like as a famous person. Seeing that confidence grow through how Raphael was treating him was really heartwarming. He was definitely just someone who wanted someone for himself, someone who would just love him, give him everything that he wanted, but also someone that he could just like spoil. You know, he would like see a really expensive shirt and he would be like, should I buy this for him? I'm just gonna buy it for him because it made me think of him and I just want him to know that I was out here thinking about him. And he's just so thoughtful yet so shy about his thoughtfulness and like hesitant about it. And Raphael is just down bad. He is 100% an obsessed love interest. He has been thinking about Jaeyoon for years, and now that Jaeyoon is in his grasp, he is definitely not gonna let him go. He is like, you know what, I don't know if I'm gay, I don't know if I'm bi, I don't know if I'm pan. All I know is that I want to be with Jaeyoon. That is all I care about. That is all that matters. And I am going to make sure that I worship him in the best way possible. I thought that their relationship was so sweet, so romantic, so sexy. I really enjoyed the smut scenes between the two of them. The main reason I couldn't quite make this an all-time favorite is because the ending was just a little bit too convenient in my opinion. It was very much like everything worked out perfectly. As I may have mentioned, Raphael was engaged to a woman during this time and he does cheat on her, and she definitely could have smacked him around a little bit for that. I think that he deserved that for being a cheater. I think she was a little bit too understanding, and that she was kind of like, oh, why didn't you say you were exploring your sexuality? Like, I get it, exploring your sexuality can be scary, but it's not an excuse to cheat on your partner. So that is the one reason I really just couldn't make it one of my all-time favorites. But overall, the relationship was just a 10 out of 10. All right, guys, now we are moving into the top 5 of the year. Again, these are in order of my lowest top 5, but still a 10 out of 10 read, to my all-time favorite. Sitting at number 5, we have The Spirit Bares Its Teeth by Andrew Joseph White. This is an author that I could definitely see becoming a favorite. I have not read his newest book, which I believe is called Compound Fracture, but I the year before read Hell Followed With Us. Really enjoyed that. He writes young adult horror, but it is definitely pushing the limits of that YA genre. He does not shy away from the body horror in his books, and the way that he combines the body horror with the trans experience is 10 out of 10 to read. He really knows what he is doing. He himself is a trans author. In this book, we are following a young trans boy who is born with violet eyes, which means that he has the ability to kind of commune with the spirits. However, because society sees him as a girl, he is not actually supposed to use his powers. He's just supposed to marry some other violet-eyed man to increase that man's chances of having a violet-eyed child. And our character is not interested in that, and he makes that very well known, and that gets him sent to a boarding school for women with violet eye disease, which, you know, these doctors are kind of trying to figure out, like, what is the reason? Like, why are these women acting out? There's clearly something about their violet eyes that is like disturbing them. And you're like, no, the women that you have here are queer, they're autistic, they're feminist. That's the problem with these women. So our character, once he arrives there, is approached by some of the spirits of the girls that have been there who claim to have been murdered there. And he's got to look into it, not only to save himself, but the other girls there. And on top of that, he has an unexpected ally. I really enjoyed the writing in the story. I think Andrew does a great job of writing horror. It is a perfect atmosphere. The writing is disturbing yet beautiful. I really enjoyed Silas. Our main character, Silas, is also autistic, and the autism representation in here was really well done, coming from someone who doesn't have autism, but just based off of what I do know about autism and other stories I've read with autistic characters, this was really well done, really respectfully done. And I also thought that the author did a great job of exploring the trans experience. On top of that, I did enjoy the other female characters. Do I wish we got to know them a little bit better? Absolutely. But one thing I kind of mentioned when people were complaining about that is that Silas's autism causes them to not do well in social interactions. And so I felt like since we were following from their point of view and they were kind of holding themselves at a distance from these characters, it made sense that we didn't get to know them as well because Silas didn't have the social skills to get to know them. So I think that for me, it was excusable that the side characters did feel slightly flat, but at the same time, I really did enjoy the connection that Silas started to form with these girls. Horror aspects, really well done. I felt the ending was really satisfying, and I will say that the author kind of wrote an ending where I kind of have my fingers crossed that they write a little bit more in this world. I do think that it is an interesting setting and magic system that they started in this book, and I think it would be a lot of fun to continue on from where this book ended, despite the fact that it does wrap things up nicely as a standalone as well. The fifth book on this list is going to be The Kingdom of Gods by N.K. Jemisin. This is the third book in the Inheritance trilogy, which I do own, but I do own the bind up, so I'm not going to hold that up. But this is the third and final book in this series, at least with the full-length books. There are 2 novellas after it. I still need to read that final novella, and so help me, I am going to read it in February. I am already planning it for my February TBR. But this, I would say, was my favorite out of all the books in this series. They are more companion series where each book follows different characters at different points, but at the same time, you can really see some of the impacts of occurrences in the previous books and how they are affecting people in the current read. I would say a very simple explanation of this series is that we are following a world that interacts very closely with its gods and with the children of their gods. So that's mostly what we're dealing with in this series. I always enjoy a god and human interaction, and I feel like we get a great example of that in this third and final book, where we are following one of the godlings and their interaction with 2 human children over time and the impact that it has on this specific God, and not just the specific God, but the way that godhood is viewed and the future is viewed and the way that humans view gods moving forward. I really enjoyed this character. I feel like a lot of people did not like this final book. For me, it was absolutely my favorite because I felt like it did a great job of wrapping up the series and just really being a culmination of everything that happened in the first 2 books. I felt like plot-wise, this book was the most exciting. Personally, I felt like the stakes in this book were the highest and that it had the most kind of action-like scenes. We definitely had a more intense villain character than we did in any of the other books. So I really felt like this book was giving me everything that I wanted, with great character dynamics, great character development, plot points, more world building. The ending of this book had me crying, where I was like literally sobbing, where I was like, no, why is this happening? And then the author finished off this series in literally the most perfect way, where I was just like, I don't know how this is gonna end. I don't know what she's gonna do. And then she did it, and I was like, N.K. Jemisin, are you a god? I just want to know, because I honestly could not have come up with a better ending to this story. It was so satisfying, and it was so full circle, where I was just like, so you're a genius. Glad we established that. So I had a really great time with this. I love N.K. Jemisin's writing. I love her characters. I feel like a lot of people say they struggle to connect to her characters, but for me, I am just really interested in the characters that she develops. They feel very real. I would say that despite them sometimes even being gods, they're not the most stand out characters that you've read about. But at the same time, I feel like you can always, at least to some degree, relate to her characters, and I feel like her characters always have a good amount of growth throughout their story. So I think she does a really great job with characters. Some people agree, some people don't. I guess it just depends on what you like to see in your characters, and I like to see whatever the heck N.K. Jemisin is putting into her stories. All right, so the next book, I will say this book and the next one could easily be flip-flopped. They are essentially on the same level in my mind, despite being very different books, but I just decided to put them in this order today. We'll see how I'm feeling about it tomorrow. But the fourth book on this list is going to be Moth by Lily Mayne. This is which one? Book 5 of the Monstrous series. I read a few of them in 2024. I will say Gloam, the book right before this, I also gave 5 stars, but I have to say that so far this is my favorite book in the series. It went ahead and dethroned Soul Eater, the first book. I loved Moth as a character. He is honestly giving angsty, insecure, moody teenage vibes, yet at the same time he is giving I've never been loved and all I want is love and acceptance vibes, and I just felt for him so strongly. This is a relationship between Moth, who is half monster, half human. This is a monster romance series. This is the first time we are following someone who is the product of a human monster mating. I'm 99% sure that the love interest in this book is Charlie, who used to be a soldier. So essentially this is a post-apocalyptic setting. A lot of monsters came through this rift that one day appeared in Earth, and they started to come into our planet, and we were like, what the heck? And we bombed the literal shit out of them, which kind of caused us to bomb the shit out of ourselves as well. Destroying humanity. Sounds like something the military would do, and we are following people about 20 years after that initial war between humans and monsters, and in each individual book we are following a human as they fall in love with their monster partner. They are all male love interests at this point. I absolutely love Lily Mayne's writing. I absolutely love the overarching story that is happening, especially in the last few books in this series. It has definitely been building up to something pretty intense, and I of course love her smut scenes. She is the queen of smut in my book. I would say that she is probably the author who writes the smut that works the best for me. So if you are looking for a good monster romance, 10 out of 10 would recommend this series. It is available on KU, and this book specifically, we are following Moth and Charlie as they are off to seek information about a raider that had gone missing from a camp that they on occasion visit, and they had gotten some information that he may be at a prison essentially on the other side of the country. So Moth is someone who travels around a lot. He's not really accepted anywhere, so he just goes from place to place trading. He knows a lot about the underground markets, the raiders in the community who live out in the desert. He also knows a little bit about the cities, and so he's like, yeah, I'm the man for the job, I'll go. And Charlie's like, I'll go with you, because Charlie is kind of trying to figure out if he wants to return to the military now that he has learned a lot of sketchy things about the military. So he kind of wants to take this as an opportunity to figure out his life. And along the way, obviously, the two of them start to get feelings for each other. Initially, Charlie was like, hey, Moth, I've noticed you think I'm kind of hot, and I think you're hot, so let's be friends with benefits. And obviously that whole friends with benefits thing turns into something more. I really enjoyed this book. I like the books in this series where there's more traveling occurring, because I like learning more about the world and kind of interacting with different monsters and different groups. This book also had a little bit to do with a cult that we had come in contact with in a previous book, so I was interested to kind of wrap up that plot line with that cult, because that was a gross cult that I was interested to see what we would be doing about them and their shenanigans. That being said, the main thing that I really enjoyed about this story really was the dynamic between our characters. Charlie really did start to fall in love with Moth relatively quickly and really took it upon himself to care for him and give him all those things that he just has never gotten in his life, and just really helping Moth come out of his shell a little bit, or chrysalis or cocoon, or which one. There's a difference. There's a cocoon and then there's a chrysalis, and I can't remember which one a moth comes out of. But that being said, absolutely loved this story. The characters, the plot, the writing, the smut, everything about it was fabulous. I do still need to read the 7th book in this series. There's supposed to be a total of 8, and the author has been kind of dragging her feet on coming out with the 8th one. So I have been reluctant to read the 7th one because I'm scared it's going to have some sort of cliffhanger, and then I'm just going to be sitting there with no release date for the last book in the series. So Lily Main, please, please, please write that final book. I am here, your cheerleader, supporting you as you finish up this amazing series that you wrote. All right, so this is the 4th book. I kind of feel like I accidentally said Moth was the 4th book, so I apologize if I did say that. This is the 4th book, but like I said, Moth and this book really could be interchanged. They are very different, but I absolutely loved both of them, and that is going to be The Heart's Invisible Furies by John Boyne. This is a historical literary fiction story in which we are following a queer man in Ireland, and I believe that this character is born shortly after World War II, and we follow him essentially throughout his entire life as a queer man in a society that is very much under the control of the church, which obviously does not approve of queerness. On top of that, he meets a boy at a very young age and they become very good friends, and he actually, to a degree, falls in love with this boy, and this boy has a big impact on his life. This is one of those stories that is pretty darn depressing. This book definitely has quite a few trigger warnings in it. It has quite a few traumatic moments for our character. He doesn't have the best life for a good chunk of his life because he's pretending to be someone that he's not, and he definitely is struggling with his queer identity within this country that would absolutely despise him if he ever came out. But what I really enjoyed about this book is that the author put quite a bit of humor in it, so I felt like all that sadness was really well balanced with these really humorous moments that had you laughing, and I was thoroughly surprised by how much joy and laughter I experienced throughout this book as well. I honestly went into this book thinking it would kind of go between being kind of boring, because I'm not a big historical girly, and being just like plain sad, but I thought the pacing of this book was really well done. I thought that the author did a really good job of kind of choosing these instrumental moments in our character's life to really focus on throughout the story, so that by the end of this book we really knew who Cyril, what was his name? Cyril. I hope I'm saying that correct. Cyril? I'm gonna call him Cyril. I just think that the author did a wonderful job of using this character to kind of show the change in views of the queer community within the general public. We definitely go through some pretty hard times for the queer community. We do explore the AIDS pandemic within the story. We definitely see kind of what queer people had to do in order to experience the kind of relationships that they were looking for, whether it's meeting people, you know, in public restrooms or in the park at night. And we also see kind of the violence that is inflicted upon this community as well. So it was a very hard read. It was a very moving read, but I think that John Boyne is an incredible writer, and I think that he just really did a splendid job of writing a pretty chunky book that at no point, in my opinion, dragged. I thought the pacing of the story was really well done, and I thought that despite all the hardships, that it definitely left you with a feeling of hope. So if you haven't read this book yet, I definitely think that you should give it a try. It's not one I often hear about, but it does seem that it won the Goodreads, or yeah, no, Book of the Month, the Book of the Month awards back in 2017. It is an older book. It was one of my challenge books, I believe, because I was definitely intimidated by this, but I am so glad that I read it, obviously, since it did make it into one of my top books of the year. All right, guys, we are in the top 2 here. I am very excited to talk about these 2 books. The first one is going to be To Catch a Firefly by Emmy Sanders. Let me hold this in a way where my ring light doesn't shine on it. This is a male contemporary romance. It seems that the contemporary romances did okay for me as long as they were queer. It was the hetero contemporary romances that were just not doing it. But this is a small town romance where we are following a friends to lovers couple. We are following Ellis and Lucky, and Ellis is a character who has selective mutism due to his autism, and Lucky is a young boy who moved to his town when they were, I'm not quite sure how old they were. I kind of want to say they were like 8 or 9, around that age group. And Lucky instantly kind of latched on to Ellis and was like, we're going to be friends, but I just want to let you know, one day I am going to leave this town. I am going to explore the world. And Ellis is like, that's fine. I'm happy to have you as a friend. So we spend the first part of this book kind of getting glimpses of their life together as they grow up, kind of important points in their life that they share together. And then we kind of get into the main story, in which we are following Lucky. He is a photographer for probably something similar to like National Geographic's. He is following his dream of getting out of the small town, exploring the world, but he is starting to realize that every time he experiences something great, he is calling Ellis. That is the first thing that he wants to do. He wants to hear Ellis's voice. He just wants Ellis to listen to him, and he really misses him. So he decides one day, maybe that day happened shortly after he heard Ellis may or may not have gone on a date with someone, that he needs to go home and win Ellis over. It is time for them to become more than friends, and that is what we follow throughout this book. Ellis decides to stay in his small town. He, I believe, is a corn farmer. He really enjoys this life that he's living. His mother has also been diagnosed with, I believe, MS, and so he is also staying close to home to be close to her. But I really enjoyed watching this relationship develop between the two. I know that we all love an enemies to lovers situation, but there is something about a friends to lovers situation that is just so fantastic. I think it's because I personally really love the idea of being friends with someone before my feelings for them evolve into more, and that is exactly what a book like this gives me. They have a really well developed relationship before things turn romantic. They really know each other, respect each other, love each other on every single level. I really enjoyed the writing in here. I also thought that the autism representation was done quite well. Again, not an Own Voices reviewer, but I thought it was pretty well done. I thought that Lucky does a really good job of respecting what Ellis wants, and what Ellis wants is to stay in the small town. And on the other hand, Ellis really respects what Lucky wants, and what Lucky wants is to travel a lot. And so we see these two people who have very different ideas of the kind of life they're living, trying to find a way to live a life together, and they're doing so without compromising what the other wants. So I had a great time with this romance. I thought that despite the fact that Alice doesn't really talk a lot, they had really great communication, and we love great communication within a romance novel. Overall, this was so sweet, so heartwarming. It definitely had quite a few sexy moments in it as well, and I definitely will be checking out some other books by this author. All right, guys, we are going to get into my number one book of the year. I am curious to know if you guys can guess what it is. I will give you a hint, and that is that it is the only book I read this year that made its way onto my favorite shelf. And no, it's not sitting there because it's in my hand. But that book is going to be The Traveling Cat Chronicles by Hiro Arakawa. This is translated by Philip Gabriel. This, I would say, is a Japanese literary fiction story, and one of our points of view is a cat. When I tell you this author knows how to write a cat, honestly, it was astounding. I was like, were you a cat in another life? Because honestly, I feel like you perfectly captured the essence of a cat. Like, this cat would be like, I really care about you, but I can't show it too much. But every once in a while, the cat would do something where you're just like, this cat loves his owner to the end of times. This book is following our cat Nana and his owner. Nana had been hit by a car at one point, and his owner had kind of fixed him up and brought him to the vet and took care of him while he was healing. And once Nana was healed, his owner was like, do you want to stick around? And Nana was like, sure. You know, you feed me and I don't have to be outside in the cold, so I'll stick around. And so they've been living together, and then one day his owner starts to take him to see some of his friends, to see if his friends could take on Nana, because his owner is not able to care for him anymore. And so throughout this book, we get Nana's point of view in the present day, and then every time we go to visit a friend, that friend kind of talks about a flashback to an experience that they had with Nana's owner. And kind of through the eyes of these friends, we get to see the kind of person that Nana's owner is, and we get to learn a little bit more about his past and what made him the man that he is today. And then obviously we finish off this story with tears. That's what we finish off this story with. I cried so hard while reading this book. I knew I would. Like, I'm pretty sure I picked this book up for a prompt that was like an emotional read or a book that'll make you cry or something. I knew I would cry going into this book, and boy, did the waterworks go strong. There was just the way that this author wrote this story, the relationship between this man and his cat. I feel like you have to be a cat lover, or at the very least, you know, like animal lover, to fully understand the pain and love that is in the story, because it is just so intense. As a cat lover, like, it went straight to my heart, like arrow straight to my heart. I loved every moment of seeing this cat with his owner. The ending was so beautiful and so heartbreaking, and just I just think about it. I just think about it because it just was such an impactful and moving and loving and heartbreaking, and just so many emotions just like bombarding you all at once. Honestly, I do not think that the story could have been better written, and I honestly don't think there's a story out there better suited for a crazy cat lover such as myself. I mean, my channel name is Nat Cat's Bookish Cafe. I feel like this book is perfect for a girl like me, and I would like to think it is perfect for a person like you as well. I would definitely say if there's only one book that you read on this entire list, it should be this book. It is very hyped. It is very worth the hype. The writing is great. The characters are interesting, and it will break your heart and start to put it back together as well. So this definitely deserves to be on that all-time favorites shelf, and I will definitely come back to it time and time again. All right, guys, so those were some of my favorite books of the year. I would love to know if you have read any of these and if they have found a place in your heart just like they have found a place in mine. I would also love to know which books were your favorite of the year. Maybe I will add them to my TBR, or if they're already on my TBR, maybe they will become a higher priority. As always, guys, thank you so much for supporting my channel by watching my videos, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!